Well, welcome everyone to the Window Pro podcast. I'm your host, Duncan McRae. Today I'm joined by Perry Tait, the founder of the Future of Cleaning website and the creator behind the well-known Reach It window cleaning tools. Now, Perry spent many years looking at window cleaning differently. He's not just asking, how do we clean windows, but how could we clean them better, faster, less wasted effort? So in our first part of our conversation, we're going to talk about where his ideas come from, how Reach It developed, and what makes a tool genuinely useful. Is there a way that window cleaners can improve speed without compromising quality? That's going to be revealed in the first part of our conversation. Stay tuned. Well, Perry, welcome to the Window Pro podcast. It's great to have you here. Before we get into all the aspects of Reach It, Future of Cleaning, all the technical side, I'd love to start with how you got into window cleaning. What brought you to the industry?
I was a single dad of two children and I had to be Mr. Mum. So the only way, I was actually VIP Home Services National Sales Manager at the time. So I sold over 250 of their franchises. And then somebody inquired about window cleaning, and they'd come from the UK and they asked, do we have window cleaning franchises? And I said, no. And he said, well, I've got this equipment that I'm thinking of bringing in and I wanted to do window cleaning. So that's how I got introduced to window cleaning. And then when I had to be Mr. Mum, I talked to the owner of VIP, Bill Verse, and said to Bill, any chance I can get the window cleaning leads and I'll sell in New South Wales, because I was based in Sydney, I'll sell the franchises in New South Wales and work from home. And I can start a window cleaning business and work the window cleaning leads. So that made me a window cleaner. And then I looked at it and thought how inefficient it was. I was importing the Excel poles from Denmark. Then I was thinking, I need to change my tools, and got some ideas, and we'll start selling. So we made this one will blow you away. We made a DI system that delivered TDS 50 out of the box. It was a sediment. We called it Cicadi for cicada. It had a little cicada on the logo, mm-hmm. But it delivered, we bypassed the DI tank with 50% of the water, because TDS of the water in Sydney is 100. And we bypassed half around the DI tank and half through the DI tank. So we came out with TDS 50 and it was spot free, right? And then on commercial buildings, just as a point of reference, on the commercial buildings with tinted glass, we used tap water. It was sacrilegious. It's still sacrilegious. The myth of, must be below 010 is a myth that is true in certain places and not true in others.
Well,
that's how I got into window cleaning.
I'm sure we're going to dig into that. What did you notice early on about the industry that many weren't paying attention to?
How everybody else who was doing exterior services was making $300 an hour and I was making 60. And I thought, we're doing the same as them. We're a casual service, not like home cleaning, because I'm from VIP Home Services. We did the home cleaning and the lawn mowing, right? They're all regular round stuff, and the irregular work, like carpet cleaning, roof cleaning, pressure washing, window cleaning. Like the other guys in the irregular work were making squillions, and me as a window cleaner and everybody else that I knew was making $60 an hour back then. I'm talking 20 years ago. Like, to get $60 an hour was good then, and I thought, it's not me, it's not my systems, it's got to be the tools and the technique which is making me slower than them, because the people will pay, but they're not paying for you, for you to make $300 an hour and take all day to clean the windows,
Yeah.
So you've got to get faster. So that was kind of like drove. And the other one, which was very interesting, is that I started selling the Excel poles, and I had my own trailer and van and all that sort of stuff. And then I had one pole for groundwork and one pole for 1 story and one pole for 3 and one pole for 5. And so I used the 5-story pole for 4. But if you imagine so then somebody said to me, why do I need to buy these poles? Why can't I just buy one pole and extend it or whatever? And I go, oh, what a good idea. And you're right, because if you had a 1-story pole, 2-story pole, 3-story pole, that's 6. And a 4-story pole, that's 10. And a 5-story pole, that's 15. You've got 15 stories of pole in your van, right? And you're only cleaning 5 stories. So if you could just get one pole. So that then I cut down in Excel and made a prototype of what became Reach It Mini, which is completely an industry standard now, that logic. And then I pulled it apart 1 story at a time, 11 feet, 3.5 meters at a time.
So I guess before we get too deep into it,
Yep.
I'm
You've
going to
got to
share
control me.
my own history with Reach It.
Yeah.
So back in 2012, I bought my first pure water system from Window Cleaning World, and
Yes.
they were at that point the distributor for Reach It.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
got
With feeder. Yeah.
my pole. I think it was a Reach It Mini. It was called, and
Yes.
I got my pure water system, and that pole had quite a few issues. It was the problems were handled initially through warranty with Window Cleaning World. When
Yeah.
they stopped being the distributor, you and I actually dealt with each other on this pole.
Right.
To your credit, you replaced all the clamps free of charge, and right up in the next 3 years, I used that pole. It was a little bit floppy, but the clamps held the new ones. And when
Yep.
I sold that business, it went with that. Now, today, I've
Classic.
got the Reach It Radial Rocker and the Ultralight 14. So I'm still using that. So I've seen Reach It from its infancy through to its present.
Yeah, that's 2012 is genuine infancy because well, futureofcleaning.com was registered in May 2011.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did you learn from those early pole designs, and how did customer feedback help you make progress in the development of the business?
Oh, great question. Look, I think that the number one thing is that I've stayed on live chat phone calls. Like I've always stayed at the front of the business, and every time there's a complaint, there's a little rule that somebody taught me. He's like a millionaire guy with a big business in America, and he said if there's one problem, it could be 100. There's only one guy talking. So that kind of taught me that never to ignore the voice, you know. And then as we grew and became international, we realized that the geographical issues that one guy faces, you know, is there's a big difference. Even in Australia, if you go to Tasmania, what the Tasmanian guys are dealing with in every aspect is quite different from, you know, somebody up in Darwin, you know.
Yeah.
But then when you get around the world, you've got Nevada, and you've got New York and Canada where it freezes for 36 weeks of the year kind of thing. You know what I mean? Everything's so different for every single window cleaner.
Mm-hmm.
And I really fought against the idea that there's a universal brush because I thought that the inefficiency of window cleaning is the principle that the brush belongs to the pole and you buy a pole with a brush and that's the only brush you use. So you're basically walking down the road of mediocrity. So you're getting an average result on all jobs instead of an efficient result on every job. So that's you know, kind of like the profession is listening, saying that's where constructor brush came from, which came out as a kit originally where people could put it together different ways. And then we'd listen to like somebody goes, I put it together like this and it worked like that. And I put it together like another guy would do. And so it kind of became that progression of just listening, and then trying to make the right decision.
And what would you say the real world feedback from all those window cleaners actually taught you? What's the underlying lesson you think that you've carried through your business?
Just that I think it boils down to everybody's different, and there's another rule of product development. You know, remembering that I was a window cleaner, I'd never done manufacturing before, and I moved to China and started in an apartment. But there's a rule that, you know, if the guy who's a perfectionist is going to be easy to handle, and the guy who's tough on his tools, because once I mentioned the word Neanderthalic and that didn't go down very well. So a guy who's got workers or a guy who's tough on his tools and he bashes them around and he doesn't take care of them, I've still got to develop the tool to handle. If I can get the tool to work for him and I can get the tool to work for Mr. Gentle, you know, then it's going to work for everybody. And so It's that painful, you know, like all feedback is good. A lot of the feedback you get is incredibly uncomfortable, right? So but you've got to be able to sit in that uncomfortableness.
I want to drill down into that uncomfortableness a bit later.
Right.
Before we do, let's talk about the radial system that you've
Yep.
got.
Yep.
So, as I said, I've got the rocker, I've got the light.
Yeah.
So what were you trying to solve when you came up with that brush idea?
Right. So the first one was that there shouldn't be a universal brush. There should be a brush for each job, right? That if there's BPOO on the glass, you should be able to take BPOO off without going to a second phase. You should be able to do all agitation in a single set of steps, whether it's one or two or maximum three brushes on the glass. But if there's paint overspray on the glass, that should come off. If there's artillery fungus or fern spores or fly poo or bee poo or whatever it is that's on, or stickers, they've got to come off the glass, right? And it's got to be in the brush. It can't be a second step, otherwise you lose your efficiency.
Yeah.
So it was kind of saying, okay, how do we combine multiple steps into one? How do we get the right material to do that? Because bristles and water don't remove anything which is stubborn or cooked, you know. So, and then we came up with a progression, as you can imagine, because it's 15 years. But then we came up with a bristle blade. And when we came up with the bristle blade, we understood slowly the science that the bristle blade breaks the surface tension of the glass, whether it's hydrophilic or hydrophobic. The water cascades as long as you're on glass rinsing. The on-glass rinse came from the awareness that the gardener was coming out with ultralight poles, which I thought were ergonomically wrong, because I had a light, super light pole, and I thought, I'm pressing this thing against the glass to get agitation, and if I use my pole, I don't have to press it against the glass, and then you could talk about the vectors of gravity and shit like that. So it's a lot of stuff going on in my head, but the principle was, if I can rinse on glass, I don't need to lift the pole off the glass to do the rinse, and I don't need to twist the pole. So all the out of round stuff was so you can twist the pole and squirt the jets across the glass. I'm going, that's really inefficient. I need to rinse on the glass. And then I found in Melbourne a genuine original tucker brush sitting in somebody's garage, and he had a fan spray over the top, right? And then Willie Erkin came out with maybe the wagtail wave, maybe that sort of time. And he got some 8mm tube and drilled some holes in it and got the water squirting over the top. And I thought the idea is perfectly right. That solves the issue of what Tucker was trying to do. Tucker couldn't get it to work with the technology he had 70 years ago. So he compromised and put the jets in the middle of the brush. And that became, everybody copied Tucker for 60 or 70 years with the compromise. Nobody went back to what he knew was right at the beginning, right? The water has to be on top of the brush. So it's kind of like a combination, it's 15 years squashed into 2.3 minutes. But there it is. So, I'm trying not to wax too lyrical, I'm trying to chop it up so you can ask the next question.
Listeners have been using the Tucker brush. I've used I had the Tucker Alpha Hybrid, which has got the jets in the middle and the rinse bar over the top. So I've used that in recent years. So how would you explain in layman's terms to a window cleaner listening who's never used your gear, if working away with a gardener brush, with an edge brush, a tucker brush, a zero brush, what would you say your technique is trying to accomplish?
Okay, so we go back to science, like everything which I do, work is defined scientifically as force times distance. Right. So if you want to work less, work is measured in calories, by the way, so is food, just so you get it, that it's the same thing. And so what we need to do is either work out how to achieve the task with less force from the operator, or how to get the brush or the tool to travel the least amount of less distance, right? And ultimately the least amount of distance. So the idea is what we needed to do is create a tool with a technique, right, rather than another tool, and then they use the same technique. Like if you use a tucker brush or a gardener brush and you use a reach-it brush and you use them exactly the same way, it's going to take you exactly the same amount of time. You're going to make exactly the same amount of money. The question is, can you change the technique because of the technology and the way the jets are working and the way the pads are working and the way the bristles are aligned and angled so that they have, and the contact which they have with the glass, and the fact that they break the surface tension of the glass so that you can rinse on the downstroke and get a cascading rinse. So like if you can get all of that, and the rocker block, so if you've got a difficult scrubbing pad, it's always flat on the glass. It's because the pole is moving through a radius. right? As it's going from the top of the window to the bottom of the window. So the pad has to stay square on the glass, so it needs to rock. So you're going, all of that is so that you can get the brush to travel the least number of times in order to complete an agitation, and that you can agitate on the upstroke and rinse on the downstroke. There is no secondary rinse phase. So all that time chasing the dirty water off the glass is removed. You agitate on the upstroke, rinse on the downstroke, walk away to the next window. How's that?
Yeah. So the key is you're trying to create a tool that if people invest in it, they were going to have a massive return on investment.
Yeah.
That's basically a goal.
Now, money back in a day sometimes. That's what guys talk to us.
Yeah. That's right. And when I've got a large commercial building that I do, and the reason I use the radial rocker on it is because it's slightly heavier. It sits on the window better, and I'm not trying to force tension in the pole to keep it on the glass. So
this is also, by the way, it's not just that. It's the total sum weight of the pole, right? Because you're talking about, if you imagine how a rock climber climbs up a crevasse, right? Yeah. It's a meter wide, and all he has to do is put 1 foot on one side, 1 foot on the other side, and he can jump up, right? Gravity is pulling him down, but the effect of gravity is at 90 degrees to gravity, which is a principle of science, right? So and then you apply vector. So if the pole is vertical, you can't get any pressure against the glass. Sure. If the pole was horizontal, you'd get maximum pressure against the glass, which is the pressure caused by the effect of gravity on the weight of the pole and the brush together.
Yeah.
So and so if you wanted to increase pressure on the glass, you could actually move away from the window, and gravity would be pulling down. Move away, and it would create more force to give you more agitation if you wanted to. If you wanted less, you go closer because it's a regular clean or something.
Which, by the way, in modern Australian homes is becoming harder because they're building them so much closer.
Yeah, you get a 1 meter walkway.
Cleaning that window, the pole is vertical.
Yes,
can't at any angle.
Yes,
so that's
yes, I totally agree.
Yeah,
I used to have to jump over fences and I go to the neighbours and say, "Can I please clean your neighbour's windows from your yard?"
Yes, and so we're starting to get the feel that you've been a tinkerer, trying to innovate, trying to improve things. And I guess any window cleaner who loves the industry is trying to do something a bit different. I was talking last year to Byron Guest, who we both know.
Yes.
And Byron is constantly tweaking and adjusting his wagtail, doing this, doing that, because to quote him, there are few tools that are purpose-built for the job. And it would frustrate him.
Yes.
Frustrate him for so long. So that's why he got into innovation. I guess there's a lot of window cleaners around the world that do that. We try to solve problems because, after all, there's no one job is the same as the previous job.
Exactly.
So, innovation is so important. So here we're talking about one of your key messages is that you want window cleaners to work faster. But from my experience, speed can often be misunderstood. So some window cleaners will hear faster and think rushed or lower quality. So how do you define speed in window cleaning without it becoming rushed work?
Probably use the word efficient rather than fast. Clean more efficiently. Or we need to provide social proof. That it works. I mean, sometimes I use the metaphors of or similes. I don't know which it is. My son's got these English words that I'm going, I don't know which one it is. But anyway, so when a tool changes in industry, right, the technique must change with it. So the jackhammer replaced the crowbar, which you can remember crowbars, I'm sure, from your childhood, right? But you don't use a jackhammer like a crowbar. The lawnmower replaced the scythe, but you don't use a lawnmower like a scythe. The vacuum replaced the broom, but you don't use the vacuum like a broom. And a radial brush replaces a broom-style brush, a broom with holes drilled in it, there's jets put in it. It replaces that, and it allows you a different technique. And if you use the different technique, you'll get a different efficiency. And then to understand that give you the ability, no different than a traditional window cleaner. In his little bag on his waist, he's got his stainless steel wool, he's got his blade, he's got his non-scratch pad, he's got his microfiber, he's got his scrub daddy, he's got his eco scrub, he's got all these different things in there that he knows that if he hits something on the glass that's difficult to come off, he's got to reach into that bag and find that thing and take it off that way, right? So then I'm going, well, if I could do that inside the middle of the brush, then everything which he already understands, he can apply. He's going to change the scrub in the middle of the brush to match the debris. If he's got bee poo, he's going to go for Tomcat because it rips into bee poo. But if he's got paint overspray, he's got to go for the cheese grater because the cheese grater gets underneath the paint overspray and cuts it off the glass. Yeah. But exactly like a trad guy, just like a trad guy.
Yes. And actually, speaking of the scrub buddy that people use, I carry one just in case where it gets like when I'm doing traditional work and there's a greasy spot on a cafe. The Tomcat on the scrub buddy is very good. Just soap up the Tomcat and away I go.
Amazing.
And that works out really well as an addition. So nothing to do with water fed. It's just a traditional.
Yeah. And we can cut those to the right size. If guys wanted a different size or they've got a pad that they like, part of the 2026 vision is to say, look, all of our scrubs will make whatever size people want because we make them in our factory. So we can do whatever we want, whatever people want,
Yeah. And I think it's important. I think we, as window cleaners, tend to underestimate that if something we do differently can save us 10 or 15 minutes, that's another little shop front that you're adding per hour, which means that today's jobs of 20 are now 30, which means that you're getting more turnover in your day or you're working less per week for the same batch. So we've got to think about doing things a bit different, using tools that are less fatiguing on your body.
Yes, we can. That's ergonomics. Yeah.
It's why I often beef about window cleaners who won't change the squeegee rubber every second or third day because they think it's going to cost me $8 to replace it.
Right.
10 years later, they got no wrists left because of dragging.
Carpal tunnel, deca veins.
I bought a business off a guy back in 99, who at 32 had carpal tunnel for window cleaning since he was 16. But a lot of those guys would never become more efficient in their use of tools. So
and rotator cuff, by the way, because I got a rotator cuff from trad work. I had a huge house that was covered in fly poo, I think, and I bladed the entire house. And at the end of it, like even till today, I mean that rotator cuff is a weak point in my body.
Yeah.
It wrecked me.
I think it's important that we really distinguish being faster and more efficient than being frantic and trying to just rush mad.
Oh, yes.
We want to interact with the client. We still want to have a deliberate, profitable approach.
Now, just a quick reminder that this episode is powered by Squeegee app. It's the tool that I use to handle all of my scheduling and customer relationship management. And it even has features like invoicing and quoting that can really make the organizing of your business so much more streamlined. In the show description of this episode, you'll find a discount code for Squeegee app. Try it. You'll really, really appreciate the help it will provide.
So now, the design. Let's talk about how you go about design. I've talked to a lot of guys and they go, I've just got to replace my water-fed pole. I put it up against the building and it fell over and broke. So I think, well, I don't know how that happens. I'm using the same gardener pole for 10 years and I've never had an issue. So some window cleaners, you said earlier, are very Neanderthal or rough on their tools.
Don't use that word.
When it comes to designing or improving a tool,
don't use that word.
How much?
I can tell you, I think it's horrible feedback. I just got slandered so much for saying it.
How much does the design come from feedback and some from your own ideas?
You'd have to say it all comes from feedback, right? Because my own ideas weren't commercially viable. And then some comes from God-ish, you know what I mean? You know, you get something incredible, like the constructor brush with the channels became the radial brush. The radial brush became the radial light. We just basically cut three channels off a radial brush, and that became radial light. And radial light cut another couple of channels off in theory, and you get radial ultralight, right? But it's working out how do I get this to work as a brush if I make it lighter, and will it work as efficiently, and how long do the bristles need to be so that they're hitting the glass at the right angle, otherwise the sides of the bristles are on the glass, etc., etc. So some of it comes from experience, all of it comes from science, some of it comes as a gift, I think, because I can't imagine how we came up really with constructor brush and the channel, the original extrusion, the aluminum extrusion.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's kind of like, the talents, we were given this talent and say, here you are, Perry, here's an idea to your brain or whatever, and then go do with it what you can and maximize it, kind of that parable, so I sometimes I think that really I shouldn't claim anything for myself. A lot of it comes from the prototype guys and the guys who say, I have this idea, so the guys who are sort of the gentle guys, but actually always able to, like Byron, able to tinker. Some guys can only tinker, and other guys, I've got a buddy in England, Lee Burbage, he's all thumbs, but it doesn't mean he doesn't have a good idea. He just could never, he would never even think to tinker, and say, I wonder if I can do it. But he might have an idea, what if I could do it, kind of thing. So it's the filtering. And then there's all of the uncomfortable negative feedback, which is it doesn't work. And you go, why doesn't it work? Oh, it doesn't work for you because in Arizona, the main corporate manufacturer of window frames puts the insect screen holding rail lower and out further than all the other windows. And so the constructor brush teeth, like, it's not just that place, but there were certain places in the world where the teeth on the cannons on the constructor brush just got broken like a guy in a bar fight, And then I end up in a conference in the desert in Arizona, and I go to demonstrate, and I go, oh my God, like there goes my cannons are hitting that piece of metal that I don't have that piece of metal where I clean windows, So then you go, okay, now there you go. This comes under that tough on the tools category. Is the guy really tough on his tools, or is he cleaning a window that's actually different than the other guy who's gentle on his tools? But would the guy who's gentle, if he had that window, have the same problem? Would I have found out about it earlier? You know what I mean? Because it's a global business. So we've got people in Europe, we've got people in Africa, we've got people in South America, we've got people in Oceania and Asia, and you know what I mean. So, but it's great because that gives me an enormous amount of feedback to be able to say, okay, think about it, confront, and then ultimately the design does change and becomes more perfect.
Yeah. So I guess one of those type of designs is your modular pole. You talked a bit earlier about those XL poles that you use. And how you now with rigid poles, you pull them apart. You just basically use the 1-story part or the 2-story part. What problem were you particularly trying to solve with your approach to pole manufacturing?
Well, remembering that was our very first project, and when we started, we're in 22nd floor apartment in Shanghai with Harrison at 17 years old being my assembly guy, and me as the guys ringing guys back in Australia saying, hey, how you used to buy 5 poles off me? Well, I've got 1 pole that does all of it, right? So the idea was to take this idea that came from a window cleaner when I was in Sydney, and saying, okay, can we make a pole that pulls apart 11 feet at a time, or 3.5 meters, one standard floor in Australian terms, right? And we can pull the pole apart and we can extend it if necessary. So we were the first people in the world to come up with a 2-part inverted XT extension, plus A plus B as we call it now. And plus C, originally it was a plus C, but we've stopped plus C because it's too heavy. It adds so much weight to the bottom of the pole. It's convenient to say, oh my God, I can't reach, so I'll just add something to the bottom of the pole. So that's the convenience side, which we abort, because the weight of it makes the pole flex more right? And the bigger the diameter of the sections that you add, the heavier they are, right? And then they change the dynamics and change the flex points and all that sort of thing. So there's a lot going on.
What mistakes do you think window cleaners make when choosing a length of pole?
Just that all, Castrol, like oils ain't oils,
Yeah.
poles ain't poles, nobody knows. I'll tell you how to tell a pole. Is you put the brush that you want to use on the end of the pole, you fully extend the pole, and you try and pick it up off the ground from the handle. If you can pick it up easily, it's a good pole, right? Great balance with the brush. But if you can't pick it up, like when I was just maybe 6 weeks ago, I was in the Shanghai ISSA cleaning show, and we had our hybrid 24-foot pole, and we had the Reach It tactical 25-foot pole, right? Basically identical lengths. One's 100% carbon fiber with high modulus carbon fiber in the top sections, and the other one's a 50-50 hybrid with fiberglass in the top sections, right? And we put the same brush on the end, same goosenecks, everything's identical, and we get the person to pick up the hybrid pole, and he can't get the brush. Just a standard punter. I'm not talking about a window cleaner who's got muscles and chest and arms and shoulders and all that beautiful bodies, but they couldn't pick it up, right? Because the pole's flexing, and so the more effort they put, the more the pole flexes. And then we say, okay, come and pick up the Reach It tactical, and he can just lift it off the ground and straight to vertical. So it's that from the ground, flat on the ground, pick it up, and can you take it to vertical almost effortlessly? It's a good pole.
Yeah. So do you think
that's a real test for a window cleaner?
Do you think that the sections, that the poles should be shorter with more sections or longer with less sections?
Well,
like for instance, why I raise that is I'm currently using a Gardner Mini, which is in fully extended 17 feet, and it's 6 sections. So there's little 3-foot sections. And because they're shorter, I can still do the first story, but the pole is almost rigid. There's hardly any flex.
Yeah.
So for a longer pole, for a third story, does that principle still work?
So rigidity of a tube or a rod or anything is determined not only by its composition but by its length. So if you or even in brush design, right? If you make a 5 centimeter 2-inch bristle like radial, and you take exactly the same bristle material and exactly the same bristle diameter, and you put it on radial light, and we make it 3 centimeters, or 4 centimeters, or we put it on ultralight and we make it 3 centimeters, right? The bristle becomes more rigid. Or if we use the same bristle, if we do a dual trim like radial light or radial itself, right, as a dual trim or a triple trim, then the shorter we make the bristle, the more rigid it is. So it becomes more aggressive as a second agitator on the inside of the brush. So the same logic applies to poles. The longer you make a section, the more it'll flex in relation to its sidewall. So the sidewall is your rigidity, and so a number 1 section, the top section of a pole, has a smaller sidewall than a number 6 section of a pole. So the number 6 will never flex. Number 1 is the one that's going to flex. If you make it shorter, it'll become more rigid. If you overlap it more, it'll become more rigid. The relationship becomes more rigid. Now,
I noticed when in your recent trip to the UK, you caught up with my good mate Tom Luter at CleanLink Poles.
Great. Yes.
I interviewed Tom earlier in the year on this podcast.
Yep.
He's got the anti-spin poles, the Sentinel anti-spin.
Yep.
I think he sources out of China like you source yours.
Yep.
The other big debate
we are in China, so we make ours, but we source the tube sections. Yep.
So the big debate that was in the UK last year when I was there for the Cleaning Expo was conductivity of the pole, and that some of the pole manufacturers were only protecting the bottom section. Now, you've got the shock stop. Is that a comparable feature to these ones who now insulate the bottom section to 10 kVA?
Yes. Yeah. So I've got a lot to talk about on this. So the test for an insulating handle is called HIPOT, HIPOT, but basically it pretty much is that if the material is fiberglass or Kevlar, it cannot conduct electricity, right? So step one, those are your two materials that you can use. Kevlar is lighter and more expensive than fiberglass. So the idea was always, and it was originally done by Ionics, not by us, is to create a handle that would give the person some protection against shock, right? So theirs was called the Protector. We called our Shock Stop. Theirs is made of fiberglass. I think we make ours out of Kevlar. And then that becomes something that makes sense that if you've got overhead power lines, because not some parts of the world, all the power lines are underground, so it's borders on irrelevant, right? And new suburbs in Australia are all underground. But if you work in the old suburbs, and this is the whole point about geographical differences between window cleaners. If you work in an old suburb, the power lines are there. You got to look up before you start working and do a risk assessment management profile, at least for yourself, you know.
Yep.
And so, but then last year, which is not public knowledge, but there was a window cleaner in Canada who was using Shock Stop, and it saved his life, right? He took a 0.3 second death shock and collapsed on the ground and was revived. But he had the electricity had jumped from the carbon fiber. He was holding Shock Stop, so the paramedics said it saved his life, but it jumped from an arc off the carbon fiber down to his forearm and out his ankle. So he was seriously injured. So then you go, okay, that's a factor of humidity, right? So how far, and the number of volts, right, determines how far electricity will or won't arc. It doesn't arc under all conditions the same, so it's completely varied. But we are working on that as another solution for people who are working with overhead power lines that are high voltage. It's a high voltage issue, not a 220 volt or 110 volt issue.
Yeah,
right. They're not a problem. Particularly, Shock Stop's got that. That's not going to arc. It's the high voltage power lines which are going to arc. Have got enough power to arc. Yeah. So we're coming up with an extension that'll insulate more against that. But I mean, you know, the bottom line is the manufacturer can only do so much.
Yeah, absolutely. You still got the focus on safety, and that really hit home to me at that Cleaning Expo, because I met Jason Knight, who got electrocuted back in 2024. Yeah, he's now like in a wheelchair, but
ouch.
He was using like he's had 40 to 50 operations on his feet, but he was using a gardener pole, which the bottom part was insulated, but it jumped when he went to the fullest down hand on the second section.
No.
And so Jason's got a campaign now, Look Up and Live, which I know Tom Luter is putting those stickers into the manufacture of its poles. So that sticker is part of the pole when you buy a Sentinel.
Yeah, nice touch.
So that's an important thing. So what I've got from our discussion so far is that better tools are not just the shiny things, but they're things
definitely not the color.
Work smarter. Like your tools are shiny.
Yeah, but it's not the color that you should be buying it on.
No.
Right? People often make a major decision based on a minor point, and then you should not with tools.
No.
You shouldn't be buying it based on the color.
Efficiency, that it's going to improve.
Rigidity, ergonomics.
Yes, all of those things. So I guess this is the perfect spot to pause our conversation, part one, and bridge on to the next episode. So what I'd like you to answer in the next episode, in our second part to this conversation, do you think window cleaners are held back by their tools, or is it the way they think about change? That's the question I want you to just ponder, and we'll come back in episode 2 and answer that question.